The blizzard screamed outside Emerald Hill's care home at 3:22 in the morning, and Sofia Morales stood on the frozen sidewalk with her hands pressed against a dying man's neck. Blood pooled beneath his shoulders, steaming against the snow. His luxury car wrapped around the telephone pole 15 feet away, the engine still smoking, the front end crushed like paper. The man's eyes fluttered open, then closed, his breathing shallow and irregular. His expensive suit was soaked through with blood and melting ice, his dark hair matted against his forehead. Sofia's fingers were numb. She had no gloves. She had never owned a real coat, and the thin cardigan stretched across her shoulders, the only warm thing she owned, was now soaked and pressing against his wound. Her breath came in visible clouds in the freezing air, each one dissipating into the white chaos above. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Stay with me, please." She did not know who he was. She did not know his name. She could not see the gold watch on his wrist, the kind that cost more than 3 years of her wages, because it was hidden beneath the blood. She could not see the scar that ran from his left eye to his cheekbone, the mark of a man who had survived things most people could not imagine, because his face was turned away from the flickering streetlight above. What Sofia saw was only this, a human being dying, and she was the only one there. The security team was searching 3 miles in the wrong direction. His brother's men had scattered after the assassination attempt, convinced they had finished the job. The streets of Seattle were empty, sealed shut by the blizzard, the roads impassable. Nobody was coming. There was only Sofia, and the cold, and the sound of this man's breathing growing quieter with each passing second. "I didn't save him because he was powerful," she said later, and the words were true, burned into her bones with the kind of certainty that comes from doing the only thing your conscience will allow. "I saved him because he was dying, and I couldn't walk past that." She dragged him toward the care home side entrance, her back screaming. The scars there, thin white lines running in every direction like a map of hell, throbbed with the movement, a permanent reminder of 8 years of hands that lingered too long on her shoulders, words that cut deeper than any blade. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere between the third double shift and the realization that crying would not pay her rent. The man's weight was immense. His body was solid muscle beneath the expensive fabric, the kind of strength built from a life very different from hers. But she pulled anyway, her worn sneakers sliding on the ice, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the streetlight flickered and died. For a moment, there was only darkness and the sound of wind, and the man's shallow breathing, and Sofia's heart hammering against her ribs like something trapped and desperate. She got him inside. Now let us go back to the beginning, to 12 hours earlier, when Sofia's nightmare was just starting. The Emerald Hills Care Home was a sprawling facility on the edge of Seattle, all beige walls and fluorescent lights that hummed with a sound like insects dying. Sofia had been working there for 8 years, ever since she was 19 years old, and believed that hard work could change everything. She had learned better since then. She clocked in at 7 o'clock in the evening, pulling on her medical scrubs, pale blue, worn thin at the elbows, with a coffee stain near the collar that had never quite come out. Her name tag said Sofia Morales, certified nursing assistant, but what it should have said was invisible. Invisible, and exhausted, and running on exactly 3 hours of sleep because she had worked a double shift the day before and would work a double shift the day after. In her locker, wrapped in an old plastic bag, was her grandmother's recipe book. The pages were yellowed, the binding held together with tape, and in the margins her grandmother had written notes in Spanish, little observations, memories, sometimes just a single word that meant everything. Cilantro like home. Love in every spoonful. Sofia kept it there because it was the only beautiful thing she owned, and she could not bear to leave it in her apartment where the landlord might see it and decide it was valuable enough to take. She had $34 in her wallet. $34 to last until her next paycheck, which was 6 days away. After rent, after the utilities she could not afford to turn off, after the insulin her mother needed, $34 was what remained of her existence. Douglas Hale was waiting for her in the hallway, the manager of Emerald Hills, a man in his late 50s with thinning gray hair and hands that were always too warm. His fingers found the small of her back as she walked past him, lingering, squeezing. His voice dropped low. "You're late, Sofia." That's the third time this week. She was not late. They both knew she was not late. The clock on the wall said 7 o'clock exactly, and her shift began at 7 o'clock exactly. But Douglas Hale had learned, over 8 years, that Sofia would not argue. She would simply stand there, feeling his hand on her back, feeling her spine curve inward to escape his touch, and she would say nothing. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hale," she said quietly. "The residents mentioned that tips have been disappearing from their rooms. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Sofia's stomach clenched. The tips were real. Old Mrs. Chen had left $5 on her nightstand yesterday, and when Sofia returned to collect the dinner tray, it was gone. Mrs. Ortega had mentioned a $10 bill that vanished. Sofia had not taken them. She would never steal from the residents. But she also knew, with a certainty born of 8 years of this dance, that if she said so, it would be her word against his, and her word meant nothing. "No, Mr. Hale," she said. His hand pressed harder into the small of her back, right over the scars that ran beneath her scrubs. "If I found out you were stealing from these people, I would have to let you go." "And then what would you do, Sofia? Who would hire someone with your history?" He did not know about the scars. She had never shown him. But he knew she would not leave, because she could not afford to leave, because there was nowhere else to go. That was enough. "I understand," she said. "Good girl." His hand finally released her. "Room 312 needs a full bed change. Mrs. Patterson is having trouble again. And after that, we need you to help with the evening medication rounds. Tanya called in sick, so you're covering her station too. A double shift." Of course it was a double shift. It was always a double shift. Sofia moved through the evening like a ghost, quiet and faithful and invisible, exactly as she had been trained by 8 years of this place. She changed Mrs. Patterson's bed while the elderly woman wept softly, apologizing for the incontinence, and Sofia whispered that it was all right, squeezing her weathered hand. She distributed medications with careful precision, checking names and dosages, watching patients swallow pills that cost more per month than Sofia's apartment. She mopped floors at midnight while the residents slept, the smell of industrial cleaner burning in her nostrils. At 2 in the morning, she sat in the break room with a cup of coffee made from grounds that had been reused 4 times, and she opened her grandmother's recipe book. The page fell open to a recipe for pan dulce, and in the margin, her grandmother had written, "When the world is cruel, make something sweet." Sofia's eyes burned, but she did not cry. Around 3 o'clock, she heard the sound of an engine outside, loud and wrong, and then the screech of brakes and the terrible crunch of metal hitting something solid. The fluorescent lights flickered. An alarm sounded somewhere in the distance, muffled by the blizzard, by the walls, by the distance between the building and the street. She stood. Something in her chest had tightened, some instinct older than thought. Sofia walked to the side entrance, pulled open the heavy door, and stepped out into the blizzard. The wind tore at her, immediate and vicious, and the cold was a physical thing, a blade wrapped in ice. Visibility was almost zero. Snow fell horizontally, moving like it had intention, like it wanted to bury everything in this part of the world. That was when she saw him. A man lay on the frozen sidewalk, blood spreading beneath his shoulders in a dark bloom against the white snow. His expensive suit was torn. His face was turned away from her, but she could see the intensity in the way he held himself even in unconsciousness, a kind of coiled power that suggested this was a man who was used to controlling rooms and bending the world to his will. She did not know his name was Nicholas Bianchi. She did not know he controlled half of Seattle's underworld, that his organization ran operations through 6 different states, that men trembled when he entered a room. She did not know his brother had just tried to kill him in a power grab gone wrong, that the car wrapped around the telephone pole belonged to his security detail, that somewhere across the city his men were searching frantically, finding nothing. She saw only this, a human being dying. And she could not walk past that. Sofia pulled off her cardigan. She pressed her bare hands against the wound on his neck, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to hold this stranger's life inside his body through sheer force of will. Her fingers went numb. Her breath came in clouds. The man's eyes fluttered open once, unfocused, seeing nothing, and then closed again. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please stay with me." She dragged him toward the door, her back screaming, her body moving on something that was not conscious thought. The scars throbbed. The wind howled. And this man, this stranger, this person she had never met, drew one more breath, and then another, and Sofia held him there in the doorway between the blizzard and the warm fluorescent lights inside, and she did not let go. Before we continue, if this story has already seized your heart, drop a like. Share this with someone who needs to know that miracles come from the most unexpected people. Subscribe so you do not miss what happens next. Now, let us rewind to understand how Sofia came to be standing alone on that frozen sidewalk at 3:22 in the morning, and what this dying stranger would come to mean to everything she had survived. 12 hours before Sofia Morales dragged a dying man through a doorway into fluorescent light, she was on her knees in room 351 of Emerald Hills care home, scrubbing the same linoleum floor she had scrubbed 5,000 times before. The floor did not need scrubbing. Mrs. Patterson had not left her bed in 3 days. But that did not matter. Douglas Hale, the facilities manager, had pointed at a microscopic dust particle visible only to him and his cruelty, and Sofia had nodded and retrieved the bucket and gotten down on her knees without speaking. The afternoon light filtered through the windows in thin, grey ribbons. Outside, snow clouds gathered on the horizon like a conspiracy. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed their endless mechanical song, a sound Sofia had long ago stopped hearing, the way you stop hearing your own heartbeat until the moment something threatens to stop it. The smell of antiseptic and overcooked vegetables hung in the recycled air. Somewhere down the hallway, an elderly man called out for his daughter. His daughter had not visited in 7 years. Sofia knew this because she had cleaned his room every single day for 7 years. She scrubbed harder, her knuckles raw against the brush bristles, her back throbbing in that particular way that meant the scars were remembering. The scars always remembered before her conscious mind did. They were like a clock counting down to something, a warning system installed in her own flesh. Thin white lines ran across her shoulders and down her spine in every direction, a map of 8 years drawn in tissue and pain. Not all of them were from Douglas Hale. Some were older. But Douglas Hale had added his own marks to that map, his hands lingering on her shoulders in the medication room, his breath hot against her neck, his voice low and certain of its own permanence. "You know what happens if you complain, Sofia. Who would believe you anyway?" She had not answered because there was no answer that would keep her employed and keep Emma's medical bills paid and keep the eviction notice from arriving on the 3rd Tuesday of the month like clockwork. Room 347 needed fresh sheets. Sofia stood, her knees made a sound like old hinges, and moved to the linen cart. Mrs. Chen lay in the bed, 93 years old, her hands trembling against the blanket, her eyes following Sofia with the kind of gratitude that broke something in Sofia's chest every single time. Mrs. Chen's family had visited that morning. They had left $120 in cash on the bedside table. "For you, Sofia. For your kindness to our mother." Sofia had seen it. She had wanted it so badly her hands had shook. Then Douglas Hale had appeared in the doorway, and his eyes had found the money, and he had smiled that particular smile, and Sofia had watched him pocket the entire amount as she tucked fresh sheets under Mrs. Chen's mattress. "You are so good to me, Sofia," Mrs. Chen whispered. Sofia did not trust herself to speak. She patted the elderly woman's hand instead, and Mrs. Chen's trembling fingers gripped hers with surprising strength, as if she could sense how close Sofia was to breaking, and was trying to hold her together through touch alone. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Sofia's shift had extended. Douglas Hale appeared in the hallway with his hands in his pockets, his manager's badge catching the fluorescent light, and informed her that the night supervisor had called in sick and she would be staying for a double shift. No request. No question about whether she had somewhere to be, someone waiting for her, a daughter who needed her mother at home. Sofia had simply nodded and said okay. She could not afford to say anything else. At 3 o'clock, she found 30 minutes to herself in the supply closet. The closet was narrow, lined with cleaning supplies and spare bedpans and boxes of latex gloves. Sofia sat on an overturned bucket and pulled her phone from her pocket. A text from her sister Lucia glowed on the screen. Emma's doctors want to start the new treatment next month. Cost is $35,000. Her insurance denied it. I'm not sure what we do, Vivi. I'm not sure anymore. The number burned into Sofia's vision. $35,000. Sofia checked her bank account by habit, the way a person touches a bruise to confirm it still hurts. The number was worse than she had expected. $34. That was the complete total of her wealth in the world. $34 to last 7 more days until payday, and payday would net her approximately $300 before taxes, which meant she would clear maybe $210, which meant she would still be infinitely far from $35,000. She sat in the supply closet in the dark and did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere between her mother's funeral and the first time Douglas Hale's hands had lingered on her shoulders. Instead, she opened her grandmother's recipe book, the only thing she owned that had belonged to someone before her. The book's spine was cracked. Its pages were yellowed. The margins were filled with handwritten notes in her grandmother's careful script for Sofia's wedding day. For Sofia's baby's first birthday. For when life feels too heavy to carry alone. Her grandmother had written these recipes in love, written them as evidence that somebody somewhere had once believed Sofia would have a wedding, would have a baby, would have days so joyful she would need recipes to celebrate them. Sofia held the book against her chest and sat in the supply closet and tried to remember what hope felt like. By 9 o'clock that evening, the snow had begun in earnest. The television in the staff break room showed a weather alert. Roads closing. Blizzard warning. Wind gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Douglas Hale stood in the doorway and smiled that particular smile and told Sofia she would be staying all night now. The roads were closing. Someone had to maintain the facility. Sofia was dependable. She was always dependable. At 9:15, a woman arrived to visit her mother in room 312. The woman moved through the hallway like money itself had taken human form. Her coat was cashmere, worth more than Sofia's rent for 6 months. Her earrings were diamonds. Her shoes clicked against the linoleum with the sound of certainty. This was Victoria Ashford. She owned 3 hotels downtown. She treated service work as the way other people treated furniture, as something that should be invisible unless it was in her way. Victoria found Sofia changing the water in a flower vase outside her mother's room. She looked at the vase and then at Sofia and then back at the vase, and her expression shifted into something sharp and cutting. This is unacceptable. Clean it again. Do it properly this time. People like you should be grateful to have jobs. The least you could do is not be so lazy about it. Sofia nodded and said nothing. She emptied the clean water and refilled it with clean water and arranged the flowers the exact same way she had just arranged them. Victoria watched for 7 seconds, then clicked away down the hallway. Sofia's hands were shaking. They would not stop shaking for the next 3 hours. The night passed in that particular way that night shifts pass when you are exhausted and afraid and running on nothing but obligation. Sofia moved between rooms like a ghost, like a blade through air, touching nothing and no one except when absolutely necessary. She checked on Mr. Hernandez in room 308, who had suffered a small stroke and who could no longer feed himself. She held water to his lips and spooned applesauce into his mouth and pretended not to hear him cry quietly about the daughter he had disappointed. At 2:50 in the morning, Sofia finished her final round. The facility was silent except for the wind outside, which had become something alive and malevolent, throwing itself against the windows with the force of something trying to break through. The snow was so thick now that the parking lot had disappeared. The world had been reduced to white and dark and the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of her own breathing. She needed air. Just one breath of air that was not recycled, not filtered through a facility that smelled like death and disinfectant and broken promises. Sofia pulled on her cardigan, thin, worn through at the elbows, and stepped outside at 3:22 in the morning. The wind struck her like a blow. The snow was so deep it reached her shins. The temperature was so far below freezing that her lungs burned with each breath. She turned her face upward into the blizzard and let the snow fall on her closed eyelids and tried to remember what it felt like to be a person instead of a ghost moving through other people's lives. It was then that she heard the sound. Not a voice. Not a scream. A sound like metal collapsing, like physics giving up, like the world rearranging itself into a different shape. Sofia opened her eyes. 3 blocks away, at the corner of 7th and Pike, a car had wrapped itself around a telephone pole like a serpent wrapping around a branch. The vehicle was luxury, even from a distance, even through the blizzard, Sofia could see that. Long and dark and worth more than her entire building. The windshield was shattered. One door hung open. And on the sidewalk, barely visible in the snow, a figure lay motionless. Sofia's body moved before her mind caught up. She was running. The snow was too deep and the wind was too strong and her cardigan was too thin and none of it mattered. She ran toward the wreckage because there was a person lying on the ground, and she could not walk past that. The snow fell in sheets so thick they erased the world. Sofia stood in the hospital parking lot at 3:22 in the morning, her cardigan, thin, worn through at the elbows, offering no protection against the wind that tore down 7th Avenue like a blade wrapped in ice. She had stepped outside because the fluorescent lights inside Emerald Hills care home were suffocating her. 8 hours into her 3rd double shift of the week, the recycled air thick with disinfectant and the quiet desperation of dying people, and she needed something real. She needed cold. She needed to feel alive instead of invisible. That was when she heard the sound. Not a scream. Worse than a scream. The sound of metal collapsing, of physics rearranging itself. 3 blocks away, at the corner of 7th and Pike, a luxury car had wrapped itself around a telephone pole like a serpent constricting its prey. The vehicle was beautiful even in destruction, long, dark, worth more than her entire year's salary. One door hung open. The windshield was shattered into diamonds. And on the frozen sidewalk, barely visible in the blizzard, a figure lay motionless. Sofia did not hesitate. She did not calculate the cost of being late back to work or the danger of approaching an unknown situation. She ran. The snow reached her shins. Her thin shoes offered no grip on the ice. But she ran toward the wreckage because there was a human being on the ground, and she could not walk past that. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black wool coat that had cost more than everything Sofia owned combined. His face was pale as marble, eyes closed. Blood pooled dark against the white snow near his left temple. Sofia knelt beside him, her hands moving on instinct, caretaker training from 8 years of work taking over her panic. She checked for pulse. Weak but there. Breathing. Shallow but there. His eyes fluttered open for a single moment, unfocused and drowning, and he whispered a single word, Elena. Sofia did not know who Elena was. But she saw the wedding ring on his finger, saw the way his voice broke on that name, and understood that Elena was someone this man had loved with everything he possessed. She whispered back, "You're going to be okay. I promise you." Then she dragged him. His body was heavy, dead weight, his expensive coat slick with blood and snow. Sofia pulled him toward Emerald Hills care home 3 blocks away, her muscles screaming, her lungs burning from the cold. The service entrance was unlocked, she had a key, had used it countless times during her night shifts when the main doors were locked. She hauled him inside, leaving a red trail across the white linoleum of the back hallway. Thank God no one was there at this hour, thank God the night supervisor was sleeping in the break room. Sofia pulled him into the empty physical therapy room, the one with the heating pad and the supplies cabinet and the lock on the door. She got his coat off, underneath, a white dress shirt torn open, revealing a chest wound that made her stomach clench. She did what she had been trained to do. Compress the wound with gauze. Apply pressure. Do not stop applying pressure. Call for help. She called 911 3 times. Each time, the operator's voice was strained, explaining that every ambulance in Seattle was responding to blizzard-related emergencies, that wait times were indefinite, that she should do what she could and they would send someone as soon as possible. Sofia's hands did not shake. Her hand stayed steady because this man was dying and he had whispered a woman's name like it was a prayer. 40 minutes passed. 40 minutes of applying pressure and changing blood-soaked gauze and whispering to this stranger that help was coming, that he was going to make it, that Elena would want him to fight. His eyes stayed closed. His breathing stayed shallow. The phone on his wrist buzzed, a watch worth more than her monthly rent, and she saw the name flash on the screen, Vinny. Ronaldo. Dominic. The names kept coming. She silenced the calls. His jacket lay crumpled beside her. His wallet fell from the inner pocket, landing on the tile floor. Sofia hesitated, then picked it up. The cash inside, $3,000 in crisp hundreds, made her breath catch. She had exactly $34 in her purse. $34 to last until her next paycheck. $3,000 would change everything. It would pay for Emma's medical bills. It would pay her rent. It would buy her breathing room. She held the money in her shaking hands. Then she saw the photograph tucked behind a business card. A woman with dark eyes and a brilliant smile, her hand extended to show a wedding ring. The edges of the photograph were worn soft from being held 1,000 times, from being looked at during moments when this man needed to remember what love felt like. The photograph was the most valuable thing in that wallet. Sofia carefully returned the cash and the business card. She tucked the photograph back into its place. She set the wallet on the counter beside her. At 4:47 in the morning, the ambulance finally arrived. The paramedics wheeled a gurney through the service entrance, their uniforms snow-covered, their voices urgent. "How long has he been like this?" the older one asked, already assessing, already moving with practiced efficiency. 40 minutes, Sofia said. Car accident, blunt force trauma to the left side of the chest. I've been applying direct pressure to the wound. His name is, she stopped. She did not actually know his name. She had seen only that wallet, and in her panic, the name had not registered. You did good, the paramedic said, and something in his tone suggested that this man should already be dead, that she had somehow defied the arithmetic of injury and time. They lifted him onto the gurney, strapped him down, moved him toward the ambulance with the kind of controlled urgency that meant they had stopped believing he would survive but were going to try anyway. "Wait," Sofia called out. "His wallet. His personal things." She handed it to them, and they tucked it into a plastic hospital bag. As the ambulance doors closed, she saw his face one more time, pale, unconscious, belonging to someone so far outside her world that he might as well have been a different species. The paramedics pulled away into the blizzard, red lights dissolving into white. Sofia stood alone in the service hallway, her cardigan soaked with blood, her hand stained, shaking now that there was no longer an emergency to hold her together. She had 2 hours before her shift officially ended. 2 hours before she would have to return to the residence rooms and check vitals and empty bedpans and smile while Douglas Hale looked at her the way men look at things they own. She went to the bathroom and washed the blood from her hands. The water was cold. She scrubbed until her skin was raw, until there was no evidence left except the stains on her cardigan, which she shoved into her work bag. At 8 in the morning, when her shift ended and she was pulling on her coat, she found something on the counter in the physical therapy room, the wallet. It must have been forgotten in the chaos, left behind when the paramedics rushed. Sofia picked it up, hands trembling. She opened it slowly. The business card inside read, Nicholas Bianchi. Salvatore Enterprises. The address was downtown, in the financial district. She found his driver's license. The photograph was him, younger, but unmistakably him. She found his phone number. She found the $3,000 still there, still calling to her. She looked at the photograph of Elena again. She thought about what it would mean to have lost someone like that, to carry their memory in your wallet through the years, worn soft from holding. Sofia closed the wallet. She looked up the address online using her cracked phone. Salvatore Enterprises was a 10-minute walk from the downtown post office. She had never mailed anything important before, had never had anything important to mail. She went home to her studio apartment, 6 blocks away, a box with a single window overlooking the alley, the mattress on the floor because she had no money for a frame. She sat at the kitchen table that was really a folding card table and wrote a note on the back of an old medical bill. Found this at the care home where I work. Hope you're okay. Be good to yourself. You have people who love you. She signed her name, Sofia Morales. No return address. She did not want anything in return. She did not want this man to find her, to somehow become entangled with her small broken life. She sealed the wallet in an envelope, paid for postage using coins she had been saving, and dropped it in the mail slot at the downtown post office at 9 in the morning. Then she walked back to her apartment, back to her mattress on the floor, back to her jar of pennies and her grandmother's recipe book with its margin notes about which ingredients cost what and how to feed a family on nothing. She did not know that Nicholas Bianchi never forgot a debt. She did not know that his closest lieutenant, Vinny Rossi, a man with silver threading through his dark hair and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw, had already been making calls, tracing databases, following the thread of a name, Sofia Morales. She did not know that in 72 hours, her life would collapse entirely. The knock came 4 days later. Sofia was standing in her apartment, the same studio box, the same poverty, counting the same $34 for the 100th time, wondering if she could stretch it to include groceries. Coffee. Maybe some rice. The knock was authoritative. Professional. The kind of knock that meant official people, which terrified her because she had no documents, because she was always one mistake away from being discovered as someone who did not belong anywhere. She opened the door. 2 men in black suits stood in her hallway. Both were large in the way that meant their bodies were tools. The older one had the scar. His eyes were granite. His voice, when he spoke, was low and controlled, Sofia Morales. Her mouth went dry. Mr. Bianchi would like to thank you personally, the scarred man said. Not a request. We're here to take you to see him. Sofia's hands trembled. I don't need thanks. I just did what anyone would have done. The scarred man Vinny, though she did not know his name yet, stepped closer. With all respect, no one would have done what you did. Most people would have kept the wallet. Most people would have kept the money and disappeared. Mr. Bianchi does not forget those who save his life. The other man was already moving toward the stairwell, an invitation that was not an invitation. 20 minutes later, Sofia was sitting in the back of a black SUV, watching the city pass outside the window, watching it transform from her neighborhood, where the buildings were crumbling and the streets smelled like desperation, into neighborhoods where the buildings were glass and the streets were clean. The mansion appeared like a dream. Stone and marble and gardens buried under snow. Wrought iron gates. Security cameras in every corner. Sofia's heart hammered against her ribs as Vinny escorted her inside, her cheap jacket dripping snow onto marble floors so clean she could see her reflection. Chandeliers dripped crystal. The walls were hung with paintings that probably cost more than her entire building. This was a world she was never meant to occupy. A man descended the grand staircase slowly, carefully, bandages visible under his black shirt. Nicholas Bianchi. The man from the snow. Alive. His face was pale, his movements controlled, but his eyes were intense, dark and burning like coals. He studied her for a moment that stretched too long, as if he was seeing something in her that other people never bothered to look for. You returned this, he said. His voice was rough, controlled, deeper than the ocean. He held up the wallet, the photograph of Elena visible between his fingers. Most people wouldn't have. Sofia's hands clasped to stop them shaking. I almost didn't. I needed that money. I needed it so badly I could taste it. But that picture. She gestured weakly. I could tell it mattered to you. I could tell she mattered. Nicholas descended the final steps. Elena. My wife. She died 3 years ago. The pain in his voice was a physical thing, a presence in the room. He gestured to a sofa. Sit. Please. Sofia Saturday. Vinny and his partner, Nino, she would learn later, withdrew to the edges of the room like shadows. "I have food brought," Nicholas said, and within moments, a spread appeared, fresh bread, fruit, cheeses, things Sofia had not seen in months. She refused at first, pride holding her tongue, but her stomach growled so loudly that the sound filled the silence. Nicholas simply nodded to Nino, who set a plate in front of her. As she ate, each bite tasting like angels, Nicholas watched her. Not with hunger. With something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "Why did you save me?" he asked finally. "You didn't know who I was. You risked everything walking toward a stranger bleeding on the ice." Sofia met his eyes. "You were dying. That's all I needed to know." Something shifted in Nicholas's expression, a crack in a stone facade. When she reached for water, her sleeve rode up, exposing the edge of a scar on her wrist. His entire body went rigid. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. "How long?" His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Sofia pulled her sleeve down. "I should go." But Nicholas stepped closer, and his voice was not commanding, it was requesting. "Show me." She turned. She lifted the back of her shirt slowly, exposing the roadmap of her own suffering, white raised scars, pink fresh ones, some that had never fully healed. The silence that followed was the kind that holds weight. 8 years, Sofia said quietly, pulling her shirt down. "My manager at the care home. Douglas Hale. He's been taking my tips, forcing overtime, and he—" She could not finish. "Show me everything." It was not an order. It was a plea. Sofia told him. She told him about Douglas's hands, about the supply room, about reporting him once and being written up for theft she did not commit. She told him about Victoria Ashford, the wealthy hotel owner with connections everywhere, who had cornered her in the parking lot 2 days ago with Douglas and demanded $35,000 in 3 days or they would destroy her reputation entirely, tell everyone she was running scams with dangerous men, make sure she could never work in this city again. "I'm telling you," Sofia said, "because I think they might use me to get to you. I'm leaving tonight. I'll disappear. They won't find me." Nicholas's expression was carved from ice. "You're not going anywhere. And they're going to pay for every scar on your back." Sofia stood. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody. I clean bedpans and eat leftovers and sleep on a mattress on the floor." Nicholas moved closer, and when he spoke, his voice was steel wrapped in gentleness. "You saved my life when I was nobody to you, just a dying man in the snow. You returned money you desperately needed because you saw a photograph and understood grief. You're not nobody, Sofia. You're the first person in years who saw me as human instead of power." Vinny's phone buzzed. He checked it, and something in his expression changed. He stepped forward. "Boss. We have something." But before Nicholas could respond, Sofia spoke. "There's something else. Something you need to know why I needed that money so badly." She pulled out her phone. On the cracked screen was a photograph of a small girl, bald from chemotherapy, smiling with a kind of courage that broke something inside you. Emma. Her niece. 6 years old. Leukemia. The next phase of treatment cost $35,000. Insurance had denied coverage. Her sister was falling apart. Sofia had been sending every dollar for 2 years. Nicholas looked at the photograph for a very long time. "What's her favorite color?" he asked. Sofia blinked, surprised by the question. "Purple. She loves purple." Nicholas nodded. He made a single phone call. His voice was quiet, controlled. "Transfer $35,000 to Seattle Children's Hospital. Emma Morales." "Yes. Tonight." He hung up. Sofia's knees buckled. She sat hard on the sofa. "No. No, I can't accept that. I can't." "It's already done," Nicholas said. His voice was final. And Douglas Hale and Victoria Ashford will never threaten you again. I promise you that. What Sofia did not know was that Nino had already been digging through databases, through phone records, through the architecture of Douglas and Victoria's lives. What he had found was darker than extortion. The care home was connected to a trafficking network. Residents' families were being exploited. Vulnerable people were being moved. The FBI had been building a case for months but lacked a witness. A person willing to testify. Nicholas had just found her. He made another call, get the files ready. Everything we have on Hale and Ashford. We're handing it over to the FBI tomorrow morning. Outside, the snow was still falling. Inside the mansion, something had shifted. A debt had been acknowledged. A promise had been made. And Nicholas Bianchi, the man who ruled through fear and silence, had decided to burn his entire world down to protect a woman he had just met. The freezing morning air cuts like a blade wrapped in ice. Sofia's breath comes in shallow gasps, turning to mist in the November darkness before dawn breaks over Seattle. The rain has turned to sleet, each frozen droplet stinging her exposed skin with the same violence as the night she found Nicholas bleeding on this very sidewalk. But that was mercy. This is different. The Mercedes idles against the curb outside Nicholas's mansion gates, engine rumbling. Douglas Hale and Victoria Ashford stand waiting like predators who have finally cornered their prey. Sofia sees them and her legs nearly give way. She has nowhere left to run. Behind her, the mansion. Ahead of her, the end of everything. Douglas moves first, fast and angry, his hand grabbing Sofia's arm and twisting. His fingers dig through her jacket, finding the same scars underneath that Nicholas had traced with such terrible gentleness 2 nights ago. Sofia's back screams. She bites down on her tongue to keep from crying out. Time's up, Douglas hisses. His breath smells like cheap whiskey and menthol cigarettes. 48 hours is over. Where is our money? The $35,000. Victoria stands beside him, already filming on her phone, the camera pointed directly at Sofia's face. Her smile is the smile of someone who has spent her entire life knowing that the world belongs to her and everyone else is just borrowing space in it. She is dressed for an early morning in a cashmere coat that probably costs more than Sofia's entire apartment. Her nails are perfect. Her hair is perfect. Her cruelty is perfect. Say it, Victoria commands, her voice smooth as poison. Look right into this camera and confess. Tell the world you stole from the residents of Emerald Hills. Tell them you are a thief. Tell them you lied about us. Sofia's mouth opens. No words come. Victoria leans closer. Or I call my friend at Seattle Children's Hospital. The one who manages the billing department. Emma's treatment gets cancelled. Leukemia doesn't pause, Sofia. Those cells keep multiplying. Your 6-year-old niece dies while you stand here refusing to cooperate. The words hit Sofia like a hammer. Emma. Purple Emma. Bald Emma with her courageous smile and her drawings taped to the hospital walls, stick figures holding hands that said, Vivi will help me when I am scared. Sofia's hands begin to shake uncontrollably. Not from cold. From the weight of 8 years. 8 years of silence. 8 years of accepting the unacceptable because resistance cost too much. 8 years of making herself smaller and smaller until there was barely anything left of who she had been before. The recipe book presses against her spine through the backpack. Her grandmother's handwriting, margin notes in fading blue ink, Mija, you are stronger than anyone knows. Stronger than you will ever believe. Do not forget this. Do not ever forget. Sofia's grandmother had written those words 50 years ago in a small kitchen in Mexico City, hand-stained with cilantro and lime juice. She had written them for a granddaughter she would never meet. Words traveling through time, waiting. The false confession starts to form in Sofia's mouth. Just words. Just 8 words that will destroy her and save Emma. Just 8 words that will let her disappear into the city like she planned. Just 8 words and it will all be over. Rain soaks through her clothes. Her vision blurs. She thinks of the night she saved Nicholas. She thinks of his hand gentle on her scarred back. She thinks of him saying, "I want you to understand something. Your survival is not insignificant. You matter." She looks directly into Victoria's phone camera. "No." The word comes out clear and steady, like a blade through silence. "I didn't steal anything." "You did. For 8 years you stole from me. Every dollar. Every dignity. Every moment I spent terrified in your offices while you touched my back and pretended it was accidental. You stole from me, and I am done being silent." Douglas raises his hand to strike her. 3 black SUVs appear from nowhere, engines cutting off simultaneously. Doors open without sound. 12 men in tactical gear move like ghosts across the wet pavement, each one moving with the precision of people who have trained together for years. Their jackets say FBI in white letters across the back. Vinny catches Douglas's wrist mid-swing, twists it behind his back with the kind of controlled violence that someone learns through decades of loyalty. Douglas screams. His arm bends at an angle that nature did not intend. He crashes down onto the wet pavement on his knees, the shock of cold concrete and his own powerlessness hitting him simultaneously. Nino takes Victoria's phone from her hands. She reaches for it, screaming, but he has already backed away. His fingers move across the screen, uploading the video she just recorded directly to FBI servers. Evidence. Her own words, her own threats, her own crimes, sent to federal prosecutors in real time. Nicholas steps from the lead vehicle. He is wearing a dark grey coat over a black suit, and the cold morning air seems to part around him like water around stone. His eyes find Sofia first, checking her, reading her injuries with a glance. Then he turns those same eyes toward Douglas and Victoria. The look in them is not anger. It is something far worse. It is the absence of mercy. Federal agents swarm like a choreograph machine. Agent Rodriguez, a woman with silver streaks in her hair and the exhaustion of someone who has spent months building a case, steps forward with papers in her hand. Douglas Hale, Victoria Ashford, she announces, loud enough for the news cameras that are already arriving from 3 directions, "You are under arrest for labor trafficking, racketeering, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit extortion." The words land like blows. Each charge is a separate weight, piling on top of the others until the sheer mass of them becomes impossible to bear. Douglas collapses into sobs, his entire body trembling like a cornered animal. Tears and mucus and terror stream down his face in the rain. His voice cracks into a wail that sounds almost inhuman. "Please, please, I'll pay her back. I'll confess to the tips. Just don't put me in prison. I'm begging you." Agent Rodriguez does not pause. Her voice is ice. "We have been investigating the trafficking network operating through Emerald Hills Care Home for 11 months. We have evidence of elderly residents being exploited, their families extorted, vulnerable people moved through the system like inventory. Thanks to Mr. Bianchi's evidence and testimony from 8 other victims who came forward in the last 48 hours, we have you on 43 counts. You are looking at a 40-year federal prison sentence. No parole. No early release. 40 years, Mr. Hale. That is more time than many people live." Douglas's hands are cuffed so tight his fingers turn purple. He is led toward a federal vehicle, his face already appearing on the news cameras. By tonight, his photograph will be on every news channel in Seattle. By tomorrow, every news outlet in Washington state. His face, his name, his crimes, spread across the internet like a virus that cannot be contained. Victoria tries to run. Her heels slip on the wet pavement immediately. She makes it 3 steps before agents catch her, 1 on each arm, moving her back to where she was standing. Agent Chen, a younger man with cold precision in his movements, steps forward with his own stack of papers. "Victoria Ashford," he announces to the cameras, to the reporters, to the world, "your hotels are being seized as proceeds of criminal enterprise. We have evidence of 12 immigrant workers held in debt bondage, coerced labor, tax evasion totaling $2.3 million, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Your assets are frozen as of this moment. Your business licenses are suspended pending criminal investigation. Your reputation is over. Victoria's face crumbles. The perfect makeup that took an hour to apply runs in black streaks down her cheeks. The carefully constructed image of wealth and power, built over decades, disintegrates on live television in the span of seconds. She screams something about lawyers and legal rights and people she knows, but no one is listening anymore. The cameras have already moved on. The story is being typed and uploaded and shared. By the time the sun fully rises, millions of people will know what happened on this Seattle sidewalk. By the time the week ends, 40-year federal sentences will have destroyed two people who built their entire existence on the destruction of others. Nicholas watches both arrests with cold satisfaction. His men stand at perfect distance, ready, watchful, loyal. They have worked for him for years. They have seen him order violence, order silence, order death. But they have never seen him move like he moves now, stepping forward to place himself between Sofia and her abusers, his body a shield. He speaks quietly, only for her to hear, though his voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. Justice, not death. Too quick, too easy, too merciful. They will spend 40 years remembering what they did to you. Every single day. Every sunrise in a prison cell. Every meal eaten behind bars. Every moment of their lives will be haunted by the memory of this morning. That is a punishment far worse than anything death could offer. Sofia stands frozen, rain falling around her like benediction, the recipe book pressing against her spine, her grandmother's words finally understood, her own voice finally heard, and for the first time in 8 years, she is nobody's victim anymore. 1 week had passed since the arrests. 7 days of police cameras, federal agents, news vans circling the Emerald Hills care home like vultures. 7 days of Sofia living in Nicholas Bianchi's mansion, walking through halls that cost more than every apartment she'd ever occupied, eating meals prepared by a chef whose salary exceeded her entire net worth. Emma was in Seattle Children's Hospital, 72 miles south. The treatment had started 3 days ago. Every evening at 6 o'clock, Sofia's sister Maria called with updates. The first infusion went well. The second caused minor nausea but nothing alarming. The oncology team said the next 6 weeks would be critical. Sofia listened to each report while standing on a balcony overlooking the city, the recipe book pressed against her chest like a shield. The mansion was beautiful in a way that made her skin itch. Leather-bound books lined walls she couldn't afford to paint. A kitchen contained appliances worth more than her former yearly salary. Crystal glasses caught light and threw it back in fractured rainbows. Everything whispered that she did not belong here. Everything in her home country, poverty, struggle, invisibility, had been correct. Nicholas had not left her side except when business required it. He sat beside her at dinner, his men watching from careful distances, their expressions confused. In 15 years, they had never seen him do this, sit close to someone, listen more than he spoke, ask questions about her childhood, her mother, her hopes. Vinny had mentioned it to Nino in the security office. Neither man could explain it. "You're quiet tonight," Nicholas said on the 7th evening. They were in the library. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, a fireplace that burned with the kind of controlled perfection only expensive things achieved. The photograph of Elena sat in a silver frame on the mantel. Elena with dark curling hair, Elena with eyes that held secrets and strength, Elena who had been his wife and was now only memory. Sofia held a glass of water she hadn't sipped. "Just thinking about Emma. About what happens next. The treatment is working," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. The doctors were clear. "I know. But what happens after that? What happens when I need to work again, when I need my own place, when I need to go back to being invisible?" She turned to face him. "I don't belong in this world, Nicholas. Every day I stay here, I become someone I'm not." He rose from his chair and moved to the window. Outside, Seattle sprawled in evening darkness, lights beginning to ignite against the coming night. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had spent years learning painful truths. Do you know why I survive in this world? Why my brother's betrayal didn't destroy me the way it destroyed others? Sofia waited. Because I learned to see people clearly. Not what they pretend to be. Not what they want you to believe. But who they actually are when no one is watching. He turned back to her. You are not invisible, Sofia. You have never been invisible. You just lived among people who refused to see you. That is not the same thing. She said nothing, but later that night, after he had gone to his room in the East Wing, after the mansion had settled into the kind of silence that only came with extreme wealth and excellent soundproofing, Sofia moved to the mahogany desk. She found cream stationery in the drawer, expensive paper that probably cost more than her daily food budget used to be. She wrote by hand. The words came without planning, without editing, each sentence a confession she couldn't make to his face. Nicholas, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done. Emma is getting her treatment. Douglas and Victoria will never hurt anyone again. You gave me justice I never thought I'd see. But I can't stay. Every day I'm near you, I put you in more danger. Your enemies know my name now. They'll use me to hurt you. I won't be the reason you get hurt again. I saved you once, let me save you again by leaving. She paused, the pen hovering over the paper. Through the library window, she could see the driveway where the black SUVs remained parked, guards inside them, always watching, always ready. How many targets did those men have on their backs because of her? How many of them would die in some future retaliation, some revenge motivated by her presence here? I need you to know something I couldn't say to your face. You made me feel like I mattered for the first time in 8 years. You saw my scars and didn't look away. You treated me like I was worth protecting. I think I'm falling in love with you, and that's exactly why I have to go. She looked at the photograph of Elena. Elena with her knowing eyes, Elena who had belonged to this world, Elena who fit. How could Sofia ever be more than the woman who was useful once and then became a liability? How could she be anything but the ghost of someone else's tragedy? You deserve someone from your world, someone who doesn't bring danger and chaos. Someone like Elena was strong and beautiful and worthy of you. I'm leaving my grandmother's recipe book on the desk. It's the only thing of value I own. The margins have her notes, her advice, her love. Keep it, and maybe sometimes you'll remember the invisible woman who got to feel visible for 1 week. Thank you for everything. Goodbye. Sofia. She placed the letter beside the recipe book. The leather cover was cracked with age, the pages dog-eared, the margins filled with her grandmother's precise handwriting offering instruction and wisdom in equal measure. A note at the back read, "You are stronger than anyone knows." Those words had been written for Sofia's mother, who had passed them to Sofia during the worst year of her life. Now she was leaving them here, with Nicholas, as evidence that something real had existed between them. At 4:17 a.m., Sofia moved through the mansion with the careful silence of someone who had spent years trying not to be noticed. The guard in the main hallway slept with his head tilted back, his breathing deep and regular. She slipped past him, through the front door, down the driveway toward the gate. The October air was cold. Fog rolled in from the bay, turning the streets into something from a dream, something that felt less real than the mansion she'd just left. She had $34 in her pocket. The bus station was a 15-minute walk from the warehouse district. Portland was 3 hours south. She could disappear there, find work under a different name, send money anonymously to Emma's treatment fund. She could go back to being invisible. The warehouse district materializes around her in the pre-dawn darkness. Steel-sided buildings, concrete that had absorbed decades of rain, the smell of rust and old metal mixing with salt air from the Puget Sound. A few lights glowed in the distance. The bus stop was just ahead, a shelter made of plastic and hope, a place where poor people caught rides to somewhere slightly less impossible. Footsteps behind her. Measured, deliberate, the sound of expensive shoes on concrete. Sofia's heart seized. She spun around and saw Nicholas standing 20 yards back, still in the clothes from yesterday, his dark hair disheveled, the letter gripped in his hand like a weapon. "You think you're protecting me by leaving?" His voice carried an edge she had never heard before, something raw and vulnerable and angry all at once. Behind him, she could see Vinny in the car, watching but not interfering, the way a lieutenant honored something sacred happening beyond his business domain. Sofia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm nobody. I'll only bring you pain." Nicholas closed the distance between them. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face, the stubble along his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly as he held up the letter. "You saved my life when I was dying in the snow. You returned money you desperately needed. You faced down your abusers on camera instead of staying silent. You're the bravest person I have ever met. And you think you're nobody. I can't give you what Elena gave you. I can't. Elena would have liked you." His voice softened. "She always said the measure of a person isn't their bank account or their power, it's what they do when no one's watching. You proved that at 3:22 in the morning in a blizzard." He held up the recipe book. In the dim pre-dawn light, the leather cover seemed to glow with its own softness. "Your grandmother wrote in the margins, 'You are stronger than anyone knows.'" She was right. Sofia shook her head, but he took her hand carefully, respectfully, the way someone held something precious. "Stay," he said. "Not because you owe me. Not because I saved you, we saved each other. Stay because you want to. Because you matter. Because I'm falling in love with you too, and I want to see where this goes." She looked at this man who had shown her mercy when he could have shown her nothing, who had demolished her abusers with the same systematic precision he applied to everything in his world, who had held her while she cried for the first time in years. She thought of Emma receiving her treatment, of Douglas Hale in a federal prison learning he was not untouchable after all, of Victoria Ashford watching her empire disintegrate on live television. She thought of being visible instead of invisible. "Okay," Sofia whispered. "I'll stay." Nicholas pulled her into an embrace, mindful of her back, and she allowed herself to be held. Behind them, through the warehouse window, a television played the evening news. The final report on Douglas Hale's sentencing flickered across the screen. 40 years, no parole, federal prison in a place with high walls and no mercy. Victoria's mugshot followed, her face rigid with shock, her carefully constructed world reduced to ash and legal consequences. Sofia stood in his arms and watched her abusers disappear into the machinery of justice, and she understood finally what her grandmother had known all along. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.